Hey, I want to take a moment here to show everyone the new crown jewel of my revolver collection here. This is a Smith & Wesson 19-3. Now, this gun was actually a gift to me from the people over at Sporting Systems here in Vancouver, Washington. They took this gun in on trade. They knew I really wanted one. They knew it had a lot of historical significance to me. This was the actual issued duty gun back when I used to work with law enforcement. So this gun had a lot of historical value to me. And since they knew I wanted one, they kept it for me and actually sold this to me for $0. I walked in, had a tag with my name on it and the price of $0. So I wanted to thank them for that over there. They said they wanted to go to my Patreon page and support me, and they never gotten around to it, so they hoped this would make up for it. And this definitely more than makes up for it. Although they didn't say Patreon page. I think he said like my Party On page or something. He's old like me, so he didn't understand what's going on there. But this was a gift, and boy, you couldn't ask for a better gift. I thought I'd take a moment today to not only show everyone this gun, but show everyone how revolvers used to be made and how I think they should still be made. I want to compare this old style revolver here to a little bit more modern construction and talk about all the things I like better about this gun and maybe one or two things I like better about new guns. But let's actually start a full comparison here. First off, let's talk about the finish. This has a beautiful blued finish. Now, guns nowadays don't really have this bluing anymore. They've got more of a black matte finish if you have a blued or dark black gun. This is just beautiful. You really can't emulate this with a finish that they do nowadays. You just can't do anything that looks as good as bluing as far as I'm concerned. So the finish on these old guns, man, it's nice. Now, of course, one of the reasons that this gun is blued and not colored like the other guns is because a lot of the guns now aren't solid steel guns. This is a solid steel gun. This is a good carbon steel. So, of course, it takes to a bluing process. A lot of the newer guns have alloy frames, alloy parts, etc. So, of course, they have to have a different type of finish. But even the ones that are all metal nowadays, the finish just doesn't compare to the old bluing like on this gun here. Now, one thing revolver purists will be quick to point out is that the old guns have no locks. Now, as we all know, the new guns have those ugly locks on the side of them. They don't really affect function at all, but they are an eyesore, and I really don't like the idea of them at all. But unfortunately, a lot of the newer technology guns have the locks, so you have to put up with them sometimes. But it is nice that these old guns don't have them, and I wish the new guns didn't have them either. Now let's talk about the trigger on these guns. The double action trigger is about 8.5 pounds, but it's incredibly smooth. These old guns have great triggers. Now the single action trigger, believe it or not, this thing is only about 2 pounds. You basically breathe on that thing and it's going to go off, which makes for an extremely accurate gun. The triggers on these are much nicer than the newer triggers. The new triggers are still nice, especially if you get a performance center gun, but on the older guns, even the more standard trigger was closer in quality to a performance center trigger of today. Now let's take a look at what I consider one of my favorite features of the older guns. I don't know how well you can see this here, but the actual cylinder is recessed. The bullets actually sit down into recesses in the cylinder. That way, when you close the cylinder, you've got a much smaller gap between the back of the frame and the gun. The back of the cylinder and the gun, I should say here. It just looks much tighter, looks much cleaner. I much prefer it. As you can see from this side, there's hardly any gap at all. Whereas if you look at a new modern revolver, they don't recess the cylinders and the gap is much larger. It looks a lot cheaper. You can actually see the rounds. I much prefer the ones with the actual recessed cylinder. They're just so much better if you ask me. The next thing I want to talk about is another big change in the way revolvers are made. The barrels used to be pinned. As you can see that little pin right there, this barrel is pinned in. Now, why is that better? Well, because it allows them to be more precise in how they center the barrel. If you look at the top of the gun here, look at the ribbing on the top of the gun and look how perfectly it matches up with the ribbing on the barrel. You just don't see that nowadays. Nowadays, they use the compression fit barrels and they don't even continue this ribbing right here. It doesn't go all the way forward because they know they're probably not going to get it lined up perfectly. So they just don't even do that ribbing right there on the top of the actual gun frame anymore so that you don't notice how misaligned they are. Okay, now that I've talked about the things that I think are so much better about the old guns, let me talk about a couple of things that I think are actually better on the new guns than the old guns. Now, first off, I want to talk about something that is kind of in the middle. It's not better or worse. It's just something I don't prefer, and that is the firing pin on the hammer. As you can see right there, there's the firing pin right on the hammer. Now, being on the hammer like this made them more fragile, but they are easier to change. They're much easier to change than an internal firing pin. The new guns have an internal firing pin, which I think is just sturdier and more robust. I like it a lot better. Now, this gun isn't dangerous, even though it has the firing pin on the hammer. A lot of people think that. They think if it's got the firing pin on the hammer, you can't carry it on a round, but you can. There is still a firing pin block in there. This will not make contact with a round unless you pull the trigger. So it's still perfectly safe, it's just different, and I don't prefer it. I prefer the internal firing pin. Now, another thing I don't prefer about the older guns is the square grip frame. I don't like the square grip frames. I much prefer the round grip frames of the modern gun. Now, you can get grips that make the grip frames seem like a square butt grip, but I like the round grips better because they seem to fit my hand better and they're easier to conceal. So I'm going to have to say I don't like the old grip frames as well as I like the new round grip frames. And the final thing I'm going to mention that I like better about new guns, this is where new guns have the old guns beat all to heck, and that is the sights. Now, as you can see here, the rear sights are pretty much the same as they are now on the old gun, but the front sights really don't hold up to the new sights. They're not as good as new sights. You don't have as many options because, as you can see, they're fixed. A lot of the old guns had a fixed front sight. This is actually an integral part of the barrel. You would have to file this off and then mill this out to put an interchangeable sight on here, which a lot of people do actually do to their guns. But I just think it's a lot of work, and plus you kind of ruin the original state of the gun, so I'm not going to do that. But if I wanted to change front sight, I'd have to do that. The old fixed sights just aren't nearly as good as the front removable sights that we have now, which gives us a wide variety of options for front sights, fiber optic, night sights, tritium, etc. So there you have a quick look at my new 19-3 as given to me by the good people over at Sporting Systems. I can't wait to get this to the range with my youngest son because he's going to move into 38 Special from his 22 with this gun. This will be the first gun he actually shoots that's a 357 Magnum. So I can't wait to do that. But for now, I just wanted to show it to you, and I wanted to give you a little overview of what I think was better about the older guns and maybe some of the things that I think the newer guns actually do better. So I would love it if sometime in the future they start taking some of the things that I think are better about the new guns and combine it with things I think are better about the old guns, but I don't see that happening for right now. But I just wanted to let you know, these revolvers here, if you can find one in good used condition, these are pretty much, as far as I'm concerned, how a revolver should actually be made. You ain't even my real dad.